there, hello my dear gardening friends. Oh, everything is after the rain. And if I could, I would pet this little bush here, but it's barberry bush, so it's full of prickles. But I'm training it nicely to form a nice little cloudy formation here. But today we are going to talk about beautiful ground cover, which is right here. We inherited together with our house. And the name of the ground cover is Vinca or Periwinkle. A beautiful evergreen low mat, quickly spreading ground cover with some sort of a reputation that it can run a mile in your garden if you let it do it. Vinca is a very humble, old-fashioned ground cover. Again, we inherited a small patch 10 years ago of this wonderful green evergreen mat-forming perennial with the house. It was a small little patch, and in 10 years this wonderful, adorable ground cover traveled all around my garden and nicely colonized a lot of different corners. There are a lot of things going on for Periwinkle. It is green year-round, so it forms a beautiful green presence. It covers the ground nicely, smoothing all the weeds and creating green presence year-round. Even in winter it has beautiful, nice green leaves. Now, another good feature of Periwinkle is that it spreads very quickly. For example, look here, this is 2-year-old patch. You see how nice and dense it is? Right now there is a struggle going on between Lily of the Valleys and Periwinkle, and I think because Lily of the Valleys is a little bit taller, they will stand their ground. But I'm curious to see what's going on, what is going to happen here. But look, at the beginning of last year, Periwinkle wanted to go here, and I trimmed all the stems, not to let it go on here on the stone patio, but I let it go here. And look, in 1 year, look how far it went. It went all the way here, and at the end, it's trying to colonize this area. I'm not going to let it go all the way to my beautiful arborvitaes, because I don't want Periwinkle to share space with the arborvitae roots. I want arborvitaes to have all the space there, because they are in the shade there, and shade is not really good for arborvitaes, so I have to be particularly paying attention to those arborvitaes, to their needs. So I'm not letting Periwinkle go into the roots and take nutrients from my arborvitaes. But here they are colonizing this area very well, and it looks quite adorable. Another good thing for Periwinkle is that it creates beautiful lavender-looking flowers. Flowers are very simple, 5-petal flowers, but because there are so many of them, they create a wonderful spring presence in the garden. Flowers are only in spring. Sometimes they rebloom, sometimes they don't. For me, I never shear my Periwinkle, so they bloom only in spring, and they just go wherever they want and wherever I let Periwinkle go. After Periwinkle finishes blossoming, it will create a lot of beautiful new shoots and will start its march in the garden. Now, a lot of people worry that they won't be able to control fast spreading ground covers. And I will tell you that Periwinkle is not going to invade the grass. Periwinkle doesn't like mowing. I will show you right at the end of my garden where we have a hedge, and there is grass going into the hedge. This Periwinkle invaded that strip underneath the hedge, and because we are doing regular mowing, Periwinkle doesn't like it, and it is not going into the grass. So for those people who are worried about control of spread of Periwinkle, you can very successfully control it by mowing. Or I would recommend just hand pulling the roots. They're easy to pull, and Periwinkle is not going to invade in lightning speed the new spaces. It spreads, but I wouldn't say that it's a very aggressive spreader. If you let it go, it will conquer new lands. But in my garden, it's a well-behaved ground cover. All right, let me come with you to another side of my garden. Right here is the corner where we originally inherited Periwinkle. You see all this area. So you can see that here we have dry shade. And usually Periwinkle blossoms the best in sun, but it likes shady conditions, and it likes deep, rich soils. But the good thing is Vinca is very adaptable, and here we have dry shade, and Vinca takes dry shade just fine. So I'm using that ability of this wonderful ground cover, and I'm introducing it right there under my fir tree. You see, there is a space where my kids play. We have stumps there, and the area is quite bare. I think in several years I have to rethink that space. It looks too bare, too kind of, there's too much empty space, and I really don't like it. So slowly I'm introducing Vinca there, and Vinca is taking the space just all right. So here this dense mat is many years old, but here, just for your comparison, look at this. This mat right here, this space, I started forming it 1 year ago. Last spring, I just directed all the long runners into new space, and Vinca took this space with gusto. You can still see the soil, and during this time it is important to control weeds for them not to take over. And I suspect that by the end of summer this space would be looking the same as that one, nice and dense. And the way this space is growing here, Vinca is growing here, no weeds have a chance to make it. Now, Vinca, there are two types of Vinca: Vinca major and Vinca minor. This is Vinca minor. It has smaller, sharper leaves, but Vinca major is taller, and it can overwhelm small and medium-sized plants. So, for example, look at this little guy here. He is unhappy. He is Japanese Periwinkle, I believe. And you see, he's not really happy here without sun. He didn't blossom here very well. He's quite short. He's quite short by nature, but I see that I have to move him from here. First of all, you can't see him very well here, and he doesn't add really any garden charm, any garden merit here, so I will move him. Vinca cannot take him over, but look what happened to my boxwoods. You see these little guys here? These are boxwoods, baby boxwoods, and they are growing all over on the perimeter, right here. They are 2 years old boxwoods, and looks like Vinca is taking over. So I'm going to weed it all out just around the boxwoods to give them space to mature, and then when they are tall enough, I think they will coexist peacefully. Boxwoods and Vinca here. Now, look at this. Here we have our hedge, right? So Vinca, being very resourceful, went underneath there. And because we are mowing regularly this grass, look what's going on there. You see, Vinca is never invading the grass area, but it's keeping itself far away, and it traveled across and finally made it here under our evergreen tree, right here. And all this development, we have gladioluses here sharing space with mint and Vinca. You see, all this development is happening in 1 year. So you definitely can say that Vinca is a fast spreading ground cover. Already blooming nicely. Now Vinca is marching on under my apple tree. Let's go and see what's going on there. Here you see my ground cover is marching on, mixing well with tiger lilies. Look, right there in between, coexisting well. This area under my apple tree is bare in the middle of summer. So under this apple tree we have a lot of bleeding hearts. And as you know, bleeding hearts are very spring flowers. They go into dormancy in the middle of summer, and this area becomes very bare. And since I cannot introduce any spring flowering flowers here to compete with bleeding hearts, I decided that Vinca will occupy the area just right. And look at this. This is its first year here. Last year I introduced maybe 2-3 plugs here. And look, it's politely taking over. And when bleeding hearts are going into dormancy, they will disappear in the middle of summer. This area is not going to be bare. This area will be occupied by Vinca, creating beautiful green presents. Another space where I'm trying to introduce Vinca is my front flower bed. And let's look what's going on here. Look at my creeping phlox, hugging the ground. People don't see creeping phlox as ground cover, but I successfully use it in my garden as a ground cover, and it is, although it is deciduous ground cover, it works very well in my garden. But look at this. Look at this, what's living underneath my hydrangea. A little clump of Vinca, which I introduced last year in summer, came up very well despite these very dry conditions. Here you see. And now it is going to march here and make this land not as bare here. That's what I want to achieve. I don't like a lot of bare land between my plants. So hopefully this area would be nice and green thanks to Vinca, maybe in a year or two. This area has a tendency to be very dry, thanks to our maple trees. And Vinca flourishes in dry shade. I put several plugs everywhere, maybe 10, 15 of Vinca I introduced. Vinca plugs, look. Another one here, right there, here. It is growing happily, even blossoming. Look at this humble, beautiful flower. Such a cheerful sight in the middle of spring, you know, when it's still cold outside. So also the length of this flower bed, we have Vinca marching on. This area here is so dry under the tree. And look, it's there, happily living. So if you're looking for evergreen ground cover for shade, dry shade, please do look into Periwinkle. And don't be afraid that you cannot control it, because you can. Happy gardening. I will see you next time.